Why don't you have a family name?
Because I don't have a family. I think I came from a pretty rich family. My house was like half as large as this building, even though only my parents and I lived there with a few servants. Probably some kind of nobility. So when my parents learned that their child couldn't use magic, they freaked out. They called teachers from all over Overture to try to teach me magic. Some of them were famous magical students, some were battle mages, some were athletes in magic sports. But nobody could get me to cast a single spell. When I was 8, they sent me to this madhouse. They kept checking on me for about a year, but then I never saw them again. They never told me they weren't coming back, but I must have sensed the finality in our goodbyes, because after their last visit, I always told everyone just to call me Janis. Maybe I hated the sound of my own surname because it reminded me of the family who abandoned me. And before I knew it, I had completely forgotten my surname. Mr. and Mrs. Sherwood probably still know, but I never bothered to ask. So, Janis is just Janis. It must be such a disgrace to have a child who can't use magic.
Is that so?
Well, my parents apparently thought so. They'd rather throw me away than let me tarnish the family name. They probably paid Mr. and Mrs. Sherwood in advance for my stay here, but I don't know for how long. I could get kicked out at any day now. Commander, can I ask you something?
Go ahead.
Do you think I'll ever learn to use magic?
Commander gazes at the moon again. For a while, he says nothing. When he finally speaks, there's a somber tone in his voice. One day, I took my 4-year-old daughter out to buy some toys. My wife was waiting at home. When we came home, I was shocked to find the door open, so I rushed inside. The house was a disaster. There was stuff scattered all over the place. I ignored all of it and ran as fast as I could to my room, shouting my wife's name. Commander pauses to take a deep breath before he continues. There I saw my wife lying in a pool of blood with a giant rock jutting out of the floor through a hole in her chest. I could see the horrific look on her face. Next to her was a man wearing a black mask.
That's awful.
It is awful. I was stunned. I couldn't believe my eyes. I wanted to scream, but it felt like something was stuck in my throat. The man warned me not to move, and he aimed his trembling hand at me. I could see his bloodshot eyes bulging wide through his mask. I heard a yell, "Mommy!" and saw my daughter dart past me to her mother's lifeless body. The robber must have been shocked to see somebody suddenly running at him because he cast a spell. A blast of wind exploded from his hand. Since I was still in shock, I failed to react fast enough. The wind crushed my little girl's head into a wall.
Jeez, that's
Oh, that
brutal.
poor girl. She was only 4.
Oh,
Commander's expression didn't change much, but I can see his moonlit face overtaken by sorrow. Ashley was already dead by the time I caught her body in my arms. He shuts his eyes as his lips quiver for a moment. He opens his eyes again to stare at the moon. That was 9 years ago. If Ashley were still alive, she'd be your age. But now, Woolfe is just Iden Woolfe.
what happened to the robber?
I'd rather not talk about the details. Let's just say it was the most horrible thing I've ever done in my life. Commander slowly shifts his gaze to me. We stare into each other's eyes. It's extremely difficult to learn magic after a certain age. There are people outside Overture who've never known magic. Even if we gave them mana potions, they wouldn't magically be able to use magic. It would already be too late for their bodies to naturally learn how to control the flow of mana, or how to activate the magical traits, or how to invoke the magical abilities. Those are things that magicians subconsciously learn during infancy through imitation. We imitate our parents with magic the same way we do for walking and talking. When Overture discovered magic in one of our colonies, our ancestors couldn't use it right away either. They had to get the natives to teach their children and their children's children until our people mastered it. So no, you probably will never be able to use magic.
I suspected as much.
But as a father who lost his daughter, let me tell you this. If I could have my Ashley back, I wouldn't care if she could use magic. I'd happily accept my daughter, magic or no magic.
Now that's short. Chapter 10. Lunatic Utopia.
2 days after his visit to Eclipse, Iden Woolfe went to see Johann Poe. He hoped the professor had learned something from analyzing the latest sample. And we're in Professor Poe's laboratory. Hard to say, Johann commented while fiddling with a machine whose function Iden wasn't familiar with. Even more funny-looking machinery sat around the laboratory. Iden was curious of their functions, but he decided to focus on the issue at hand. What about the sample from our first visit? Iden asked. Did you learn anything from it? I did! Johann stopped tinkering with his machine and turned to meet the commander's gaze. I learned that it looks, feels, and tastes the same as a regular mana potion. And that it works just as well. So it's just a normal mana potion then? Hard to say, Johann shrugged. Johann's answer got on Iden's nerves, but he wasn't about to argue with a professor of magical science. Will you be able to learn anything this time? The professor didn't answer right away. He threw Iden a rather cryptic glance that Iden loosely interpreted as who knows. He almost expected Johann to say exactly that, but instead the professor replied, I'll do some more detailed measurements with the latest sample. Last time I focused on more qualitative traits than quantitative, visual observations, smell tests, taste tests. But this time around I'll produce some numbers for mathematical analysis. For example, the professor continued, a spell's magical power is logarithmically proportional to the amount of mana spent, right? I'll check whether I can observe the same characteristic with Eclipse's potion. Iden wasn't aware of the mathematical side of magic at all. When he wanted fire to come out of his hand, fire came out of his hands. That was all he ever really needed to know. He replied nevertheless. Good. Hopefully that will allow us to prove that Eclipse's potions are illegal. Johann stroked his beard. I wouldn't expect too much. To be honest, the only way to know for sure if there's anything funny with these potions is to do the old-fashioned way. Which is? Controlled study.